guys, welcome back to the channel where I cover missing persons, unsolved cases, crime news, and more. It's been a little bit since I have spoken here on the channel about little Corey Micciolo. He was a 6-year-old who was abused to death by his monster of a father, or as I like to call him, the sperm donor, Christopher Gregor, in April of 2021. Thankfully, the jury did find him guilty of child endangerment and manslaughter in the case. So there was some justice and is some justice for sweet Corey after the months-long trial, and it just took so long for justice to happen, unfortunately, for Bree and Rebecca, the Micciolo family. Bree is Corey's mom, and Rebecca is his grandma, and they really fought. They fought hard for justice for this sweet little boy, and I just could not imagine when I heard about Corey, and it brought me to tears when I saw it. And most people know the case through the horrific Treadmill video where Christopher forced little Corey to run on the treadmill after calling his little child, his 6-year-old son, fat. Of course, Bree and Rebecca, they want everybody to know Corey for much more than that. I mean, he had so much, so much greatness, ahead of him. And that was all cut short on April 2nd of 2021 when, Corey died. And of course, Christopher basically did jack nothing besides beat Corey. And the more and more you hear about the lack of care that this monster father, and that's why I want to call him a sperm donor, because honestly, Chris was not a father to Corey. He was an abuser, and Corey was afraid of him. And then there's a whole situation with the judge granting, him custody and not giving Bree the emergency custody arrangement for Corey. So just like in the Tommy Valva case, and you have Harmony Montgomery, this is another failure on the Family and Child Services, Child Protective Services, and the judges involved in these cases. It's another failure by the system that should be protecting these babies, and they don't, okay? They are not doing that. So, yeah, Chris caused his death, and then he left him at the hospital to die alone, which that probably pissed me off almost as much. But the system refused to save Corey, and that will always stick with me, probably as much as the horror that this sweet boy faced at the hands of his abuser. I'm going to go through some of the case. I'm going to go through the last day that Corey was here, April 2nd, 2021, and also hear what Bree had to say once the jury found Chris guilty, but before the sentencing, because he was found guilty and it took a few months before the sentencing came through. So fortunately, he was locked up. Okay, and I also recommend you check out my playlist, as well as Brooks of Crime Lines and Lies. She covered the case longer than I did. I covered the Treadmill. That was initially how I learned about it, through, I found the group Justice for Corey. And, of course, sadly, the Treadmill video. That did bring a lot of attention to the case, which, it's a good thing for that. But, at the same time, Corey was so much more than, his abuse that he faced. At the same time, I covered it, and probably my most popular video was of his step parents. Okay, that would be Chris's father and mother, who they testified out of the jury, out of the vision of the jury. So the jury was not there in the court that day, and they were on the stand. And let me tell you what, those two nasty, nasty people, they probably pissed me off more than anything. I do agree with Bree that I do think that those grandparents, did they care about Corey? I think they did. I do think that they did care about Corey, but they cared about their son more. And that became obvious, the day that Corey was rushed to the hospital and and died alone, without his father, sperm donor by his side, or even his mother, Bree, because Christopher refused to tell Bree where he was bringing their son. This is the triage nurse who first started to try to take care of Corey when Christopher rushed in with Corey in his arms on April 2nd of 2021.
At approximately 3:48 p.m. was a patient brought to the emergency room named Corey Micciolo.
Yes.
And can you tell the court who brought Corey into the emergency room?
Gregor.
And ultimately, did you learn the relationship of Gregor and Corey?
Yes.
And can you tell the jurors what the relationship was?
Gregor is Corey's father, and Corey is Chris's son.
And where were you when you first saw Mr. Gregor with Corey?
I was in the waiting room. I was speaking to another patient at the time. I'm right near the door, speaking to another patient. I did not hear any commotion. I did not hear any urgent sound that would redirect my attention. A registrar came up to me and said, "Billy, you have to look at this." So I went over to Corey, and he was in the arms of Chris at the waiting room entrance, or just past the waiting room entrance near the desk.
Now, the first time that you observed the defendant with Corey, can you explain to the jurors the position of Corey in relation to the defendant?
Corey was over. Corey was in Chris's arms. His arms were over Chris's shoulders. His legs were dangling. His arms did not look like they had much movement to them. His legs did not look like they had much movement to him. His head was rested on Chris's shoulder. His head was his face was difficult to visualize. So when I first approached them, I knew that something was concerning, but I couldn't see everything I needed to see. So I was depending on Chris to convey a sense of urgency or unwellness that I did not get from him at first. It was more of a clinical description of what was going on, and I did not immediately feel I had to rush them back. I definitely knew it was concerning, but I needed just a little more information. If I saw Corey's face right away, it would have been much easier, but Corey's face was on Chris's shoulder.
So the first time that you made this observation, that would be the two of them would have been in the lobby area.
Yes.
And did you approach the defendant in the lobby area of the emergency room?
Yes.
And what immediate observations were you able to make of Corey in the lobby area?
So I went over to them, and I was splitting my attention between Chris and Corey. What I could tell was that there wasn't a lot of spontaneous movement from Corey. He was not really moving on his own. He appeared to have a lack of tone to his muscles, and there was a lot of support coming from Chris in keeping him in the position that he was in.
Did you speak to the defendant in the lobby area of the emergency room?
Yes.
And would this be a practice or a common practice to engage in something like that?
Yes.
And can you tell the jurors what the defendant said?
Chris told me that he introduced himself, who he was. He was the father, the son, and he told me that this was around 3, nearly 4 p.m. He told me that earlier in the day, around 9 a.m., his son was dropped off to him, was with his mother the night before. He did tell me that the patient was at Jersey Shore University Hospital and had a workup and was discharged. And just a side note, once you hear that, less than 12 hours later, you kind of go, okay, like maybe he's not that sick. So, I need more information. So talk more. So Chris told me that earlier that morning he was appeared loopy, he was very drowsy, and he put him to bed. And later in the afternoon, Corey continued to be loopy and drowsy. And when all that time passed and he was still fatigued and not himself, that's when he brought him into the ER. So that's what he told me.
After you made your initial observations and you spoke to the defendant, can you tell the jurors what you did next regarding Corey's care?
Can you repeat the question again? I'm sorry.
I said after you made your observations in the lobby and spoke to the defendant, what did you do next regarding Corey's care?
I continued the history taking, which is pretty standard as a triage nurse to get history from the patient. I would have spoken to Corey, but he was not in a place to speak. He was not making any sound hardly. I continued my brief conversation with Chris until there was a moment when Corey tilted his head back, and that's when I got what I needed to see to really kick up the speed on this emergency.
So where was Corey taken at that point?
He was taken to the emergency room. Once I saw that, then I rushed it. So I called, his eyes were in the back of his head. He didn't look well. He was pale. I called the charge nurse immediately after that, and then I got a room, and being that Chris was holding him well, I didn't waste time getting a stretcher or a wheelchair. I said, hey, you okay to go to the ER? He goes, yes, and we went to the ER, to room 6, the emergency room.
What room did you go to in the emergency room?
Room 6.
And while you were in room 6 of the emergency room, can you tell the jurors who else came into that room?
So, but I already alerted help, so they were waiting for me. In that room was various emergency nurses and our ER physician and a patient care tech.
And what, if anything, did the defendant say while you were in room 6?
At that time, now that as a triage nurse, my role was to get them to help, get the patient to help. So at that time, I focused more on Corey than the conversation with Chris. But that's because that our ER physician was speaking with Chris, getting essentially what I just got from Chris. He basically reiterated the story, how he was loopy and tired all day, and how he felt concerned that he didn't kind of shake out of that. So he brought him into the emergency room. He told him about the Jersey Shore hospital visit the night before, but it was more. I was working on Corey at the time.
Okay. And what, if anything, did you do regarding the treatment of Corey?
So we placed him on the heart monitor. Before that, we took off his clothes. That's when I noticed the bruise in his chest, and we still had to act quickly. So we put the heart monitor on him. I got an IV, drew blood from him, while the rest of the team was doing their various roles, including our physician who was talking to Chris.
What was the defendant's demeanor while you were in room 6?
While we were in room 6 was similar to when I first interacted with him in the waiting room. It was like a just. I would say it was a clinical aspect in that he was describing what was going on without much more difference than anyone else would, regardless of their role with the person. So he was conveying the information, but there wasn't much more than that.
And after you drew blood from Corey, where did you go after that?
Well, Corey required a lot of attention, so we still had an emergency room to run. So I told the charge nurse, I'll take the charge phone, which handles the ambulances. You focus on this. So I handled the charge nurse and the triage phone, and I went to various things throughout the ER while everyone worked on Corey. He was like an all hands on deck type of situation.
I'm sorry, I could not hear that, Judge.
He was an all hands on deck type of situation.
There's the monster right there. Yeah. Corey was very, very seriously, he was sick. He was injured, and he was fine when Bree dropped him off that morning. Corey was fine. So obviously there's not a lot still known about what happened exactly from the time that Bree dropped him off to the time that Monster took him to the hospital. But it's assumed that Chris beat him up. You know, he abused him and he went too far. And that's ultimately what killed Corey. And Chris's lack of seriousness, his lack of urgency, emotion, it's disgusting. And it still blows my mind, you know, that he would end up leaving him there with all these doctors and nurses. You know, he just left him there to die. I mean, that's exactly what he did. And poor Corey had no family by his side.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I'm now showing you what has been marked S48A. Do you recognize that?
Yes.
And can you tell the jurors what that is?
That is a video of that
Let me
day.
stop you right there. Is that actually a CD?
I'm sorry. That is a CD, yes.
And are you familiar with the contents of that CD?
Yes.
And have you reviewed the contents of that CD before you come to court?
Yes.
And can you tell the jurors what is located on that CD?
That is a video of hospital security footage from that day.
And that would be on April 2nd of 2021.
Yes.
And that would be at the time when Corey was brought into the emergency room.
Yes.
And are you familiar with the persons depicted on this video?
Yes.
And are you familiar with the location depicted in this video?
Yes.
Your Honor, permission to move S48A into evidence and to publish, please.
Any objection?
No objection.
S48A in evidence.
Your Honor, permission to publish.
Yes.
Thank you. Now, in regard to the video that we just viewed, did you observe the defendant coming into the hospital lobby area?
In the video?
Not in the video, but from where you were located at the time in the hospital.
The day of, I did not see him until he was already in the waiting room.
Okay. And I'm now going to approach with S48B. And do you recognize this?
Yes,
And can you tell us what that is?
that was a CD.
And what is contained on that CD?
A video of hospital security footage from that day, April 2nd.
Okay, and you reviewed the contents of this.
Yes,
And this is a following video from the video that we just saw, being S48A.
yes,
And are you depicted in this video?
I am.
And are you familiar with the location of the video?
Yes.
Your Honor, permission to move into evidence and publish.
Any objection? Seeing none, S48B in evidence.
Thank you.
There's just, again, there's no urgency, there's no emotion. I mean, obviously this is just surveillance, these are cameras, inside of the hospital. But, obviously the nurses, like this nurse, Mr. Doyle, they all describe Christopher as emotionless. I mean, he's just, my son has got, he's ill, he needs to be seen. I mean, there's no, obviously if it was Bree, Rebecca, his mother, grandmother, it would be a whole different situation. So it's just disgusting. It really is. I didn't catch this before. Look at the smirk coming off of Chris Nasty's face. But listen, this is about Corey, okay? Again, Christopher is the reason. He is the abuser, the murderer of his own flesh and blood. But it's just disturbing to me that he I don't think he ever truly felt bad for what he did to Corey. And when he cried at sentencing, he didn't cry for Corey. He cried for his own damn self. It's the same thing with all these monsters. They don't cry for their victims. They cry for themselves because he knew he was going to prison. That's exactly why he cried. He cried for himself. Now that's a monster for you, right there. This is a special that was put out between the guilty verdict and his sentencing, Christopher Gregor's sentencing, from Law and Crime with Angelette Levy.
How do you find as to the charge of aggravated manslaughter?
Guilty.
Christopher Gregor, the New Jersey man found guilty of abusing his son, Corey Micciolo, and causing the 6-year-old's death.
I just want people to know he's way more than that. He's not like just Christopher Gregor's victim. He was a smart, loving little boy.
Corey's mom, Brianna Micciolo, is here to talk about the verdict, her little boy, and she reveals what Corey told a nurse when he was in the emergency room before he died. I'm Anjanette Levy, and this is Crime Fix. Brianna Micciolo had filed documents with the court a couple of days before Corey died in April of 2021, asking for an emergency order for custody of Corey. Brianna Micciolo believed that Corey's father, Christopher Gregor, was hurting him. She had seen too many bruises on her son and felt enough was enough. 7 days before Corey died, Brianna Micciolo had called New Jersey's Department of Children's Protection and Permanency to file a complaint about the abuse she believed was happening.
And why did you make a referral to DCPNP at this time?
I felt like Corey's abuse was getting really bad, and I felt like they needed to do something about it.
That call came days after the March 20th, 2021 video that showed Corey running on a treadmill at Christopher Gregor's apartment building, Gregor speeding it up, and Corey falling, and then Corey getting back on. Christopher Gregor had told his son he was fat. He was a 6-year-old boy. Then Gregor appears to bite Corey's head. No one knew about that treadmill video at the time. That would come later, but too late, unfortunately. On the morning of April 2nd, 2021, it was Good Friday. Brianna Micciolo dropped Corey off at Christopher Gregor's apartment. She was supposed to have him back there the night before, but she had taken him to the doctor and the hospital to have Corey examined at the direction of a DCPNP caseworker. That same day, a court had denied Brianna Micciolo's emergency petition for custody.
They denied Bree. This judge, in my opinion, he's at fault as well. If she did not have to bring Corey to those apartments, to Chris's apartment that day, and leave Corey there, Corey would have been fine. But again, this is another horrific failure on the system.
I spoke with Brianna Micciolo about Corey, the trial, and the verdict. Brianna, first of all, I want to start by asking you, how are you doing after the verdict?
I'm doing okay. I feel like, everything's bittersweet. Like, we've been waiting for like this day for him to be found guilty for so long. But at the same time, Corey's still not here. So you don't know how to feel about it. Like, should you be happy? Should you be sad? It's like a mix of both.
Sure. When that verdict was read and they said not guilty on murder, but guilty on aggravated manslaughter, what were your feelings or your thoughts?
I was kind of expecting that. Um, I knew from the beginning, the prosecutors kind of informed me like it is a hard case because they can't, explain to them what exactly happened that day. So they did tell me from the beginning it was going to be hard, but once I found out that they had the lesser included charges, I was a lot more confident. But I was kind of relieved when they said aggravated manslaughter because at one point, we waited so long. Like the first year, he wasn't even charged, so we kind of like didn't expect much. And then when they came back with that, I felt like it was a relief. He was, he's responsible for this.
Now, as you saw earlier, Brianna Micciolo testified during the trial.
What, if any, bruising did you see to his body?
He had a large bruise on his chest. He had it looked like fingerprint bruises all over his arms and legs.
Micciolo was the state's first witness, and you heard her say that the state told her this could be a difficult case because prosecutors believed that Christopher Gregor caused Corey's death, but they didn't know exactly how it happened.
That Bree was able to be with her son, alive. And my heart goes out to her every single time I see his face in a photo. I mean, when is this system, family services, child protective services, it's called something slightly different in every state, okay? And the judges, when are they going to be held accountable? When are they going to stop putting these children, these babies, into the arms of their abusers and sometimes eventual killers?
Brianna Micciolo testified that she dropped Corey off at Gregor's apartment that morning on April 2nd, accidentally recording them on her cell phone for about 33 seconds. He didn't sound ill or in distress.
Did he ask me? Well, he's your other parent, so it's his right. He needs to see it because you went to the doctor, and I just want to make sure he sees that, okay? I'm not sure where he is. Yeah, he's inside. I don't know why the car's not here. That's strange.
And that was the last time that Bree was able to be with her son, alive. And my heart goes out to her every single time I see his face in a photo. I mean, when is this system, family services, child protective services, it's called something slightly different in every state, okay? And the judges, when are they going to be held accountable? When are they going to stop putting these children, these babies, into the arms of their abusers and sometimes eventual killers? Because it's happening way too much. And like I said, Corey is just one. Okay, this happens more than any of us really realize. And I can name off a handful of cases, and I'm sure some of you can. Okay, I named off Harmony, Little Tommy Valva. There are so many. And then look at Summer Wells was also kind of failed in a way. There are just so many children who are failed. And the judges, I think, they really should be the ones held accountable because This judge, the judge that granted Christopher, shared custody, but mostly the judge who denied Bree, his mother, right there on the screen, the judge denied her emergency motion to keep her son away from his abusive father. And they denied it. And that was a fatal decision.
Okay, Brianna. So, in regard to the video recording that you just saw and listened to, is that your voice depicted on the recording?
Yes,
And who is the other voice depicted on the recording?
my son Corey.
By 5:30 that evening, Corey was at the hospital and he was dead. Do you think that Christopher Gregor, I mean, what's your feeling? Do you think that he did this intentionally, or that maybe he overreacted about something and flipped out and Corey died?
Yeah, I don't think it was intentional. And I've said that before. I think, he was abusing him as he normally did, but he was um more angry because Corey had told on him basically. And he was finding out, and I think his rage was just uncontrollable at that point, and I think he took it way too far.
What would you like people to know about Corey?
Um, everyone, knows him because of that video. And
The
I
treadmill
want
video.
yeah, right. I just want people to know he's way more than that. He's not like just Christopher Gregor's victim. He was a smart, loving little boy. He loved reading, he loved painting, he loved, being an artist. But that was his true passion. And, I just want people to know he's more than just that treadmill video.
After Corey died, jurors heard testimony that Christopher Gregor put his phone in airplane mode and left New Jersey by car. He was stopped in Tennessee. During the trial, Judge Guy Ryan heard testimony outside the presence of the jury from David and Carolyn Gregor, Christopher's parents. The defense wanted the jury to hear that Christopher was being threatened by Micciolo and others and was fearful, so that is why he left the state.
I told the police because I was sitting upstairs watching TV so I could see right down the cul-de-sac. And two people got out, were throwing things at the house. And when the police officer came, he said, "Do you know who it is?" And I said, "Well, I'm 99% sure who it is, but it was a little dark, so I'd give him the benefit of the doubt. But I did give him names."
And that is Christopher's father. Okay? Again, I have a whole video just on his and Christopher's mother's testimony. And I'm going to link to my playlist in the information of this video. So this was done, like Levy's stating, outside of the presence of the jury. So while they testified, it was not used in court for the actual trial.
Okay. Did there come a time when they actually did vandalize your house?
So there was.
What happened?
Well, at that point, I was alert because there had been a few times of cars out in the front of the property, and then subsequently there was throwing nail polish and things. So now we're alerted to the fact that we need to be on guard. So I was sitting in the living room the night that they came down the street and began to throw things at our front door and broke a window and threw dead fish and ham hocks and goose egg stones and the like.
Prosecutors argued that Gregor leaving showed consciousness of guilt. In the end, the judge said the only threats the jury could hear about were the fact that Christopher Gregor could be charged with murder. What was your reaction when the defense and David Gregor in particular, Carolyn testified too, but they were suggesting that you and your family basically scared the daylights out of Christopher Gregor, and that's why he took off, because he was being threatened and things of that nature. What's your response to that?
So yeah, no one threatened him. I believe what happened was when we found out Corey passed, we were calling everyone and saying, "Oh my God, Chris did this," because he was abusing Corey, and we were afraid for this moment. So when we found out Corey passed, it was like it clicked. He killed him. So we were, calling our friends and family, crying and telling them what happened. And I believe one of them posted on Facebook saying, "Oh, this man, killed Corey," and it went like viral. Like a bunch of people shared it, and I think that's what they're talking about. But no one was, harassing them. No one was going to their house and throwing stuff. That happened months later. So, and by the time we found out, Chris was already on his way. His phone was already in airplane mode. So they didn't call and say, "Hey, they're saying you're a murderer." He was already long gone by then. So that was just, their way of making him look less guilty, I guess.
Was there anything that stood out to you during the trial that was, particularly difficult to listen to, or, it was so sad watching you testify as a mom,
Mhm.
as
Yeah.
somebody who loved your son, who tried to get custody of him, went to the courts, tried to intervene, and you were shut down. Was there anything that stood out to you during the trial that was really painful or really difficult for you to listen to?
Well, the hardest I think was, having to watch the treadmill video during the trial. They, I guess, introduced it through me, the evidence. So I had to watch it, and the first time I watched it was maybe 2 weeks while I was doing before the trial. That was the first time I ever saw it, and I had to see it. I went 3 years without seeing it for a reason. I didn't want to. So that was really hard. And then just having his defense attorney, he was allowed to say whatever he wanted. If he wanted to lie, he was allowed. So, a lot of what he was saying was just lies.
Yeah, his defense attorney, I think he pissed me off about, well, close enough to how much Chris and his parents pissed me off at the trial. And as far as Chris, getting in his car and running away, basically, in my opinion, he was a big chicken shit. Okay? He was a chicken shit. He couldn't face what he had done. He couldn't face it. But he couldn't run away forever. And when law enforcement caught up to him, watching that video, that was definitely great.
So you had to sit there and, he just says whatever he wants. And at one point, I think he was, saying I was a bad mom. And, that was hard to listen to. And having him point at me during his closing arguments, and um, he made it a lot worse than it had to be. I get defending your client, but he took the next step and just made it, hurtful.
So she takes him to community health. They do an exam there. And what happens at the end of that exam? They want her to take him to Jersey Shore. And she says, "I'll take him." Again. And this is important. It's important because if he goes by ambulance, who are they speaking to? Corey. If she takes him, who's conveying a history? Brianna. She needed to be in control of every one of those medical visits. If she controls the medical visit, she controls the narrative.
Corey's cause and manner of death were major points of contention during the trial. Jurors heard testimony from experts for the prosecution and the defense, the state saying Corey died from blunt force trauma.
Do you have an opinion, after you reviewed all of this material, in regard to the decedent's cause of death?
Yes,
And can you tell the jurors what that opinion is?
but Corey died of blunt impact injuries of the chest and abdomen with laceration of the heart, left pulmonary contusion, and laceration and contusion of the liver.
The defense contends Corey died from pneumonia and sepsis, a natural death, not a homicide.
And so I think all together, the most likely cause of death was a very severe, rapid pneumonia.
This doctor, the defense's doctor, I thought he was kind of a quack. He died of natural causes of pneumonia. No, he didn't. No, he didn't. No. Not at all. He was also very hard to listen to. So if you go back and listen to this trial, which I do recommend you do that, it is online beyond the few videos that I have if you want to listen to it. He's probably the hardest testimony to get through.
Now, there was one moment during the trial, one of many, that really piqued my interest. It was when Nurse Lindsay Carnival testified about taking care of Corey in the ER the day he died. She said Corey whispered something to her.
What was Corey's condition?
Corey was very sick. He mumbled a couple words to me. He seized.
Nurse Carnival wasn't allowed to say what Corey said. That would have been hearsay, but I wondered at the time, what did he say? Did he say something about how he was feeling or how he became so ill? Corey Micciolo found out.
So I actually asked, I heard about that, and I asked the detective, since the trial's over, if, he could tell me what, he was saying. And so he said that he had to pee, that I have to go pee. That was it.
So it wasn't anything about what happened.
No, I thought that as well. So I was very invested in finding out, but yeah, it was just that.
It turned out to be something that simple, something a 6-year-old boy or any other patient might say. It wasn't a major revelation about anything that had happened that day.
I was invested too when I heard it at the trial. I think a lot of us were. And hearing, Brianna tell us all that he just said he had to pee, well, it kind of gave me a smile in the end, through something very horrific and horrible. But yeah, I think Corey was an amazing little boy, and he was very brave and very strong, and I think that he's up there. I know he's got a little sister now, and he's watching out for her, and he's watching out for his mama and his grandma, and I think that he's their guardian angel. I really believe that. And Bree and Rebecca, they have been also very strong, and they've been fighting hard to get justice and to continue to get justice for Corey and share Corey's story. I'm going to close this out with some photos of Corey. Because again, this is about a very brave 6-year-old. Almost 7-year-old. Because his birthday was in May. It's in May. So we'll be talking about Corey again very soon. I think that I don't think I could be as brave as Corey through everything that he went through with his sperm donor, monster of a father. And I put that in air quotes. And I hope that Corey knows that there are many, many of us out here who learned about his story. We learned a bit about him through his mama and his grandma. And our heart goes out to them, and we think he was quite an amazing little guy. All right, guys, I hope you have a great rest of the day. And most of all, stay safe.